Two new documentaries coming out about Scott Peterson. Yes, that Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson, his deceased wife, who he's spending the rest of his life in jail for murdering, convicted on that very charge. But he's saying again, all these years later, it wasn't me. Could that possibly be true? It all comes down to a single piece of duct tape that's being examined for DNA. He's not been granted a new trial yet, but we'll see where all this goes. Joining me to discuss, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. What are we dealing with here with Scott Peterson coming back all these years later? I mean, obviously, he's someone who we could probably easily say is a narcissist based on his past behavior. Is this just him wanting some more attention because there's been many horrible people in the public spotlight since him?
Yeah, I'm all about let's look at the evidence. If there's, anything that can be found and discovered, we certainly don't want a case where somebody has been wrongly imprisoned. But yeah, it's really questionable. Can he prove that he is just a horrible person who lied about, his pregnant wife? I mean, all the things he did were just awful. So can he prove that, yes, he's an awful person, but not a murderer? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be what he's saying in a lot of these in the interviews of, yes, I was a horrible person, but it doesn't mean I murdered my wife. A lot of people, I think, would argue, yeah, you probably did, because there is a mountain of evidence pointing to the fact that you likely murdered your wife. Um, just to break some of that down, the fishing alibi, number one, this was a boat he claimed he was going to give as a gift. Went fishing for sturgeon with a fishing pole. That's not how you catch sturgeon. Um, and in an area where he normally never goes to, it just happens to be exactly where the bodies of Lacey and their unborn child were found. And it just happens to be that some of the anchors in the boat were identical to the ones that were weighing her body down. There's a lot to get over here, and I'm not quite
Yeah.
understanding how a single piece of duct tape with maybe someone else's DNA on it is going to sway a jury otherwise, even if the duct tape had been in the trial originally.
Yeah. The odds of this, revealing something new and important, and there's a different perpetrator, pretty tiny, pretty tiny.
I mean, how would any of this play? Because it's not like these other pieces of evidence are going to go away. We've seen other cases where duct tape is involved, and it's easily dismissed as, well, it's duct tape. It can easily get anybody's DNA on it if you even just handle the roll itself. On
Yeah,
the outside. I mean, so one could argue, maybe somebody handled it at the store and there was DNA that was
definitely.
placed on it. In the Rex Heuermann case, the DNA of his wife, and I believe I could be, I don't think I'm misspeaking here, but I believe even his daughter's DNA was on one piece that they found, and it was just being racked up to, well, it's communal duct tape. You're gonna in a
Yeah.
house, you're gonna have that. So where are they? Is this something you think is really gonna to get some traction and some ground? On this idea that just because there's some DNA in a piece of duct tape that it's gonna spark a new trial?
Yeah, I think it's doubtful, and to me, I would only be speculating and guessing. It doesn't look very likely,
Hmm.
but I'm all about, let's get to the truth. And
Hmm.
if you can get something that is questionable enough, then, take a look at it.
Is there anything that Scott can do himself? I mean, as his own witness, obviously he's spoken many times in the past. He's speaking again. Is this obviously he has nothing to lose at this point, but is
Mhm.
it? It could either go one way or the other in these interviews. It could solidify him as being, maybe we should find out more, or it could sink him even further. I'm imagining he needed to be a bit careful with how he phrased things and how he talks about things in this interview.
Yeah, I imagine he's put a lot of time into strategizing, before doing the interviews. And he really has no grounds to say anything about his behavior because his documented awful behavior and his lies and his manipulation was, revealed to all of us way back when. And so he has to own that part of it. And can he put enough doubt out there, again, assuming he's narcissistic, psychopathic, can he be charming and believable enough? He may think he can.
Hmm. A lot of people have been charmed by him. And I don't know if it's just his looks or what it may be, but there was a lot of people. I mean, he's, I believe, he's one of the, I don't know how you would quantify this, but one of the most popular prisoners, I guess, in the world in terms of getting fan mail and letters
Yeah.
from women who, want to basically be with him. I mean, let's talk about that aspect for a while because we've seen that in some other cases. We know there's been some of that going on with Koberger. It goes on with almost anybody, but
Um,
to such an extent with Scott Peterson, why is that? Especially with this horrible, horrible backstory that he has of cheating on his wife. I mean, just take the murder out of it. And let's say
yes.
he was arrested for something else and put in jail for the rest of his life. What's the appeal with something like that?
It really goes back to how non-rational human beings can be, right?
Hmm.
What woman in her right mind would think that this is somebody to begin fantasizing about romantically? What does it get down to? I think, again, people like this, they're con artists. He was a nice looking con artist. He's a smooth talker. And you have very troubled, we'll say troubled, damaged women with low self-esteem who just have an urge to rescue. They have a fantasy about this person is innocent. I mean, I've seen so many cases where it was proven that a guy was a murderer, and yet there was a woman on the outside who didn't believe any of the evidence and was going to rescue him. And they get a lot of attention. Often a guy who's incarcerated, well, he's got a lot of free time on his hands, so he writes back.
Hmm.
So they get the pen pal thing going. And so they can be very charming in the communication. And there's a certain kind of vulnerable woman that just falls for it. And it's really twisted. Those are women who I think could benefit from therapy. I don't think that the perpetrators benefit from therapy, but I think women who have this fantasy life going and this need to bask in the glow of someone famous, I think they need help.
Is someone like that? I mean, have you ever dealt with anybody that does that with a prisoner? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you bring them back around to see just how unhealthy that sort of behavior is?
Usually when I've had gals like that in therapy, you do start with their own sense of identity. These are usually people who have a lot of problems,
Hmm.
and they often come from abusive or neglectful backgrounds. And so you don't go at the prisoner thing directly. You sort of work with all the other things in their lives that are not good, and you try to solve those other problems. And then sometimes they can get a better perspective on these romantic fantasies that they tend to create.
Do they always recognize that? Do they? I mean, it seems like someone who's going to do that, even if you have all the other chaos in your life, that's another one directly to deal with. And I can imagine if somebody is saying this is wrong. I mean, does that almost encourage it more? Does that make someone like that want to do more of that sort of behavior?
Yeah, if they see this guy as this poor, victimized, wonderful person, they may then just continue to try to rescue.
Hmm.
And so you really have to deal with the other things in their lives. And do they all get better? No, certainly not.
Hmm.
But I've seen a few,
Yeah.
and sometimes the light bulb does come on for them, and they start to look at their other relationships, the other kinds of things that they've gotten into in their lives that weren't healthy, or they address their substance abuse problems, or if you can get enough of a rapport going with them and look at the big picture, often you see a shift in the attraction to the bad guy.
What does it do for the bad guy? They have, like you said, they have a lot of time to write back, and they're kind of living in their own bubble already.
Hmm.
I mean, I think there's no really better definition of that when you're in prison. You are in your own ecosystem and your own bubble, and you're getting these letters. For someone like a Scott Peterson, what do you think that does for him psychologically, getting letters like that, and for his own story, or believing his own story?
Yeah, it definitely gives them the big ego boost that they love. The center of attention, feeling important, and it gives them a very active fantasy life, which is about all they can do in prison is feed their fantasy life, their sense of grandiosity.
Does it ever, I mean, do we see this sometimes where you have a case like this? I mean, could Scott Peterson legitimately believe that he did not do this? I mean, could this be something that he's blacked out of in his mind because of all these years of professing his innocence? I mean, can one convince themselves that they did not commit a horrific crime like this, even though they in fact did?
Yeah, that would only happen in the case of a person who's psychotic or has some strong psychotic tendencies. And they may really be so poorly grounded in reality that they just don't know what happened or they don't remember. They were in a very altered psychotic state at the time. That's clearly not him. The
Hmm.
guy is not psychotic. He's strategic. He's grounded in reality. And if in fact he is guilty, he's very aware of it.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch. It'll be interesting to see these interviews and what he has to say. Yeah, I want to hear it all too. If somebody's in
Hmm.
prison and they shouldn't be, it just doesn't feel like Scott Peterson is one of those people.
No, it doesn't have that feeling, definitely.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.